welcome Prof. Topo to give a few remarks regarding this event. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Good afternoon for especially Professor Joseph Cannataci. Thank you for coming and for sharing about the data protection, right to privacy, and especially our topic today is privacy in Indonesia. We are very proud to have you here, Prof. And today also we have a seminar on data protection, which we have two speakers today, Professor Abu Bakar Munir from Universitas of Malaya and Dr. Redmond Makarim from Universitas of Indonesia. And today public lecture, we invited scholars, academicians, students, and also government staff, employee, and also NGOs. And we also invite pairs from several institutions. And I would like to express our gratitude, our thankfulness, especially for ELSAM, and also Center CCLS UNPAD. Ibu Sinta is my friends from UNPAD, and also ICTWatch, and of course our friend from DRC, Johnson Research Centers. We hope that these public lectures we can expand our knowledge, and also please don't be hesitant to ask your questions or your comments to Professor Joseph, because this is the first time that UN special reporter on the right to privacy come to us and also share the knowledge and also the development of the topics to us. As this morning mentioned by Professor Abu Bakar Munir, this is the new year, Prof, the new UN reporter. So we are very happy to have Professor Joseph here at UI. So again, please enjoy the public lectures, and thank you for of the committee of these public lectures. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Prof. Topo. But before we are hearing further on the global context on the right to privacy, it is very wise for us to know first regarding the status quo on the right to privacy in Indonesia. And to that end, I would like to invite the representative of ELSAM to give us an enlightenment regarding the issue of privacy in Indonesia. To Mr. Fadli, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. My name is Miftah Fadli. I am a researcher from Institute for Policy Research and Advocacy. Today, I come up with some updates from Indonesia around privacy protection, but I'm not going to talk about theory. I'm not going to talk about concepts, standards, because you have already had those things in your policy briefs and books that you've received before entering the room. Rather, I would like to talk about the policy situation in Indonesia. Can you move on to the next slide? Okay. In terms of guarantee and enforcement and protection of privacy in Indonesia, our constitutions have stated that yes, we have a protection. As you can read on the slide, our constitution states that everyone shall have the right to protection of his or herself, family, honor, dignity, and property. The red line that you can read is the scope of privacy that has recognized by Constitution. So privacy is not about yourself, it's not about the protection of the self. It's also about family, honor, dignity, and property. And the second line, the last red line, receive protection from the threat of fear. You can see that it leads that if you have a protection in your privacy, that leads to the enjoyment of other rights. Let's say freedom of expression. Is it right to be anonymous if you express your thought in online or in social media? Is it legal or is it right? And the law number 39 of 1999 on human rights states a slightly same thing with the Constitution. And there's also ICCPR that have been ratified by Indonesia in 2006, which Article 17 states that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary or unlawful interference. You have stressed out arbitrary or unlawful interference. It means that yes, you have a privacy, but it's not absolute rights. A state may limit your privacy, but due to a certain conditions, and it shall be prescribed by law. Move on. This is this shows you several laws that protecting your privacy, your personal data, particularly. There are 30 undang-undang or law mentioning that personal data must be protected, but it could be intercepted in a certain condition. And the laws consist of a range of legal sector from a media and communication law, and there is also law regulating about health law, trade law, and industrial law. But none of the laws rules the same thing. They impose different things. There is no integral regulation that's saying about personal data protection, about to what extent personal data can be obtained by certain authorities. Next. Yes, as I can say before that you have a privacy, but it's not absolute right. So, yes, state may intercept a citizen's personal data based on these two reasons. There's legal enforcement, ethics enforcement, and intelligence. And it is, they are regulated by a separate regulation. And there is also number of authorities that have authority to obtain your data. For example, KPK, a police department, intelligence agency, they all have authority to intercept your data based on their needs. Next. Okay. I would like to stress right to be forgotten in Indonesia. It is actually a relatively new debate in Indonesia among legal scholars. It means that every person has a control over their own personal information, that they can remove or restrain the access toward particular information. It is being regulated in Article 26 of the revision of Undang-Undang number 7 of 2008 about information and electronic transaction. But it actually lacks of explanation about what is right to be forgotten, to what extent personal data can be obtained by authorities, how about rehabilitation mechanism and oversight procedure. And no human rights standards or instrument are considered in the law. If we are speaking about cases, actually there's no cases ever recorded officially by authorities in Indonesia. I heard that police department has some records about the case, but it hasn't yet been published to public. So basically there are two cases, major cases that ever happened in Indonesia. The first one about the electronic identity card. It's a massive data collection performed by government, which has no accountability, has no transparency process, and lacks of grievance mechanism. If you feel that your data in your ID card is infringed by government, how to challenge it, how to against the government measures over your data in your identity card. And the second one is Gojek privacy policy. In the privacy policy, it said that we do not guarantee the security of our database, nor can we guarantee that the information you have provided will not be intercepted while being transmitted to us. So, the reason based on the fact that no security system is impenetrable. Is impenetrability legal to be basis of avoiding a duty for a company to mention that they have no duty to protect your data, even though they have a fundamental in its business to use your data. I think we can reflect about the business and human rights relations that has been mentioned by another special rapporteur in the UN. I think Mr. Cannataci can stress about the relation between human rights and business in terms of privacy protection. I think that is my updates. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Fadli, for your presentation regarding the current situation on the privacy right in Indonesia. And I've noted that there are several points that being addressed. First, regarding the personal data protection, that we found that there are at least 30 legislations that are at some point incomprehensive nor overlap to each other regarding the personal data protection. Meanwhile, on the surveillance mechanism, it is also the same, where the legislation mechanism also quite at some point overlap to each other. And the other point is regarding the right to be forgotten, issues that are not comprehensively regulated in Indonesia, which are also ended with certain cases like the EKTP case and also the Gojek privacy policy. And to that end, I would like to invite Professor Joseph Cannataci to enlighten us from the global perspective on the right to privacy. To Prof. Cannataci, the floor is yours.
Is this working? That's better, yes. So, forgive me if I walk around. I've been stuck in a plane for more than 26 hours to get here. So I really need to stretch my legs. When I was preparing what I'm going to speak about today, I had to think about tomorrow, where I'm going to give another speech. And I think another one on Friday, or a meeting on Friday. And so I thought I would try to do different dimensions of the same thing. Otherwise, I would get bored, and those of you, I would bore myself, and I would bore you if you come along to listen to me again. The second thing, I'm going to look at our friends from ELSAM and the faculty to make me a sign when I should stop, right? Because I have been working in this field between 33 and 35 years, and although I'm a quiet man, once I start talking about the subject, I don't stop. So you'll have to stop me, and it's a very big subject, and one which I love very much. So if you notice, I've decided to call my talk today Privacy and Personality, right? Being who I am and becoming who I want to be, right? Now, I'm looking around, and I think I'll soon win the competition of who is the oldest man in the room. Because when I look at you, there are so many young people in the room, and so many of you must be thinking about the same things. Who am I? Why am I who I am? And who do I want to be? And how do I become who I want to be? Right? And of course, part of who we are comes from our genes. We look at our parents, our grandparents, that's where our genes came from. But the next part of who we are and who we want to become comes from ourselves, or should come from ourselves. And I too am going to start off with Indonesia's constitution. And I haven't agreed with Ruben here. But if you notice, I'm going to start with something else, right? And I'd like you to look at 28F rather than 28G, which you were quoting from, right? Let me see, just a minute. How many law students do we have in the room? Don't be shy, come on. It's not a crime to be a law student. Okay, that's good. How many police people do we have in the room? Okay. And how many other social sciences or professions do I have in the room? Okay, fine. Well, I don't believe you. I've spent the past 35 years working with the police and the secret services, and they normally don't always announce themselves. And we're good friends. We don't always agree, but we're good friends. But I'd like you to go, I asked you this question as to how many lawyers we have in the room for at least two reasons, right? First of all, you know, we have an old joke which says, when you have two lawyers, you have at least three opinions, right? Secondly, when we look at this, it would be really interesting to have a discussion about what the Indonesian courts have had to say about this phrase, for the purpose of the development of his or herself, right? So the Indonesian constitution grants this essential right. And I want to learn more about this, which is why I'm going to come back to Indonesia, right? But what I can tell you is two or three things where it has been coming from in other countries. And I can also tell you about something which is brand new at the United Nations. Because one of the things we have done in the latest resolution on the right to privacy, which was passed by the United Nations Human Rights Council in March, that's 2 or 3 weeks ago, we have this. Recognizing the right to privacy also as an enabling right to the free development of personality. Do you see where I'm going to now? From what is mentioned in the Indonesian constitution to this new recognition in the wording of the United Nations, which I'm pleased to have contributed to, that we are now, for the first time in the United Nations, directly linking the fundamental right to free, unhindered development of personality to the right to privacy. The text continues, and in this regard, noting with concern that any violation to the right of privacy might affect other human rights, including the right to freedom of expression and to hold opinions without interference, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And what I propose to do during this talk this afternoon is to link this to something else, right? Now, I've noticed that in Indonesia, I've only picked on Jakarta, but I'm told by my friends that you have the same discussion happening in other cities. You have the same kind of buzzword, fashion, call it what you like, that we have and that I see in many other countries around the world. I see it in Europe, I see it in the United States, I see it in other parts of Asia, and it's this famous thing, the smart city. So let's do a small thing, right? Let me pick on some of you and ask you what you think a smart city is, right? So this is why I have a roving microphone. And we say ladies first, right? So I'm going to pick the first lady that I'm going to see. So if you notice, all the ladies are looking away. Nobody wants to see. But that's not going to fool me, right? You look like a very studious lady. So what is a smart city?
Okay, sorry. when the information gathered in one, all the information gathered in one source, and everyone can access any information.
Okay, so that's what you think is. What's your name, lady?
Sorry, my name is Indah.
Ida.
Indah.
Indah. Okay, I'm going to have to practice. I'm going to have to practice to do this. Okay, so perhaps you would like. I'm going to pick on a boy now, right? And we're going to ask the gentleman here who's Kostrat, Riders, Jester on his computer. There you are. What's your name, sir?
Aryo. Aryo.
Aryo. Okay. So, Aryo, what's a smart city to you? And do you agree with your lady companion there? With your lady colleague?
Smart city vision.
What's a smart city? Do you live in Jakarta?
No,
Okay.
I live in Depok. And,
Okay, fine. But you come to Jakarta, right?
yeah,
Because Jakarta is supposed to be a smart city. So what's a smart city?
I think smart city is like
Okay, let's give you a hint, right? Smart is opposite to what? To dumb, right? Okay. So
the city that
by definition, therefore, if I don't live in a smart city, I live in a dumb city, right? So, what's the difference between a smart city and a dumb city? Except for the politicians, because they're always dumb, right? It's always good to, jab a bit at politicians anywhere in the world. Eventually, some of them might send me to jail, but who knows? So, what's the difference between a smart city and a dumb city?
smart city that I think that city that computerize all the data and
A city that computerizes all the data. Give me an example of all the data. So I'm walking in a smart city. I'm a dumb man walking in a smart city. So what's going to happen to me?
like if you want to know anything in that city, you can just access the
How would you access it? With your finger, like ET?
on the smartphone.
On a smartphone.
Yeah, open the website and
Okay,
You
we're
can
getting
get-
there. Smartphone.
all the data.
Let's find another lady. Look, the one behind you looks very intelligent. So what's your name? What's your name, madam?
Dita.
Come again?
Dita.
Oh boy, I'm going to have to spend 1 month just practicing Indonesian names. They're all so sweet and so difficult for me. It must be my ears after the plane. So, Dita, please tell me what you think a smart city is.
I somehow agree with my friends.
You don't agree with your
opinion.
friends. That's already a healthy
I
sign.
agree.
You agree with them.
Yeah, I think that smart city is something that the government design when we as the civilian can access the data about the city by our hand, by ourselves.
Okay. So I'm going to take the microphone. I'm going to walk around and find another victim or two. But kidding apart, does anybody want to put up their hand and volunteer something about smart cities? Something which is different. Hang on. That was close. All right. I think I'm going to ask the gentleman here to tell us something about the smart city. Please. Come on. First the gentleman and then the... Oh, he's insisting to ladies first. Okay, come on. So, name, rank, and serial number, and then tell us about smart cities.
My name is Jana. I think smart city is the word in my hand.
Okay. Let me tell you what the government wants us to believe that a smart city is, right? So, I've been practicing my Indonesian this morning. It is amazingly like English sometimes, but hang on. So, I'll put this microphone here, it will be coming back to you. So let's look a bit about smart cities, right? So, if you go onto the Jakarta Smart City, and you see about these, the 6 pillars, right? The concept of the smart city in Jakarta You see, I've been practicing my Indonesian this morning. Smart governance. Smart people. That's easy. That's us, right? Smart people. Smart living. Well, we'll have to find out about that. Smart mobility. Smart economy in a smart environment. But if you notice, they're very careful. They never mention smart politicians. So it's official, right? It's official. It's a part of government policy. Everything is smart except the politicians, right? So it's clear. Now, so what are we going to do about this? Is this what smart is? Okay. And of course we can go to Smart City TV. Now I must say the internet in my hotel is very slow. I couldn't get to what it says, you know, go to the sidebar and look at the CCTV online, etc. I hope to do it eventually when I get to internet which is fast enough. Right? So, has anybody been on this website? Ooh. So that's why you don't know what a smart city is, right? It's on the internet, so it must be true. Right? Right? Okay. If you want a book for free, this is my latest book on privacy, free expression, transparency. That's for the boring hours when you have to study, right? You can go onto the website and download it for free. But actually, I'm not going to take you my latest book, which was published just a few months ago. I'm going to take you somewhere else, right? So this was said in 2012, before Edward Snowden made his revelations, okay? So, how many people in this room have heard of Edward Snowden? Don't be shy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. I'll work out the percentage of the people in the class later. So, this was said 1 year before Edward Snowden. We're going to talk about Snowden in a minute, I suspect. And this was said just a few months after Edward Snowden made his revelations about. So for those of you who haven't read about it, Edward Snowden was the contractor for the NSA, the National Security Agency of the United States, who was a whistleblower and revealed that the United States and the United Kingdom were basically intercepting everything that was going to a whole bunch of fiber optic cables and reading people's emails and anyway, a whole bunch of privacy intrusive stuff. And here we have the president of Brazil speaking at the United Nations saying, without privacy there can be no democracy. So how many people would disagree with that statement? Okay, so I'm going to take it, everybody agrees with that statement. Good, good. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the microphone, and I'm going to go to the lady at the back with the wonderful smiley and the agile camera, and I'm going to ask her, there you are, why without privacy there can be no democracy? What's the link between privacy and democracy? There's something in the Indonesian constitution too over there. What's the link between privacy and democracy?
I mean, I think when we have a privacy, we can deliberate and we can express our ideas and freedom without any threat.
Okay.
So we need privacy to express ourselves.
Okay. Before I go on to my next slide, I'm going to ask you to carry out an exercise. I'm going to be silent for 2 minutes. perhaps 3, 120 to 180 seconds. And in those 120 to 180 seconds, all of you are going to write down on the paper in front of you, privacy means, and you're going to write the definition of privacy for you. And I'm going to wander around and I'm going to ask you to read your definition of privacy. So you'd better write it down. Okay? Those people who don't write it down will have a terrible punishment. I'm still thinking of it, but it sounds terrible. So, starting now, what's the definition of privacy? Or keep it there, because I think I already know who I'm going to ask next. And as you can see, we've started the questions at the beginning rather than the end, right? We've started with a bit of interaction before, in order to get your brains going, just in case you thought you could have a rest, right? So, Professor Abubakar, could you kindly keep the time? Could you tell me after 2 minutes so I can see? That's good. We like to keep everybody busy, and it's cold. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask 6 people for the definition of the privacy, and the last person, I think, will be a police person. So, I'm going to take the microphone, because I've changed my mind, as one can. And I'm going to find another lady on the other side of the room. Let's find a lady who looks private. The lady here is wearing a lovely scarf and has a lovely smile, so she's going to answer the question. There you are. So, your name, madam?
My name is Dini.
Okay. And privacy, according to you, is?
Privacy, according to me, is related to any private things that people have, basic people have for a human being.
But what are private things?
Private things like my name, what I like, my data profile.
But you just told me your name.
My data profile.
Your data profile is?
Where I come from.
Where you come from?
My name of my parents. What I like to do, what I'm Googling every time. Data privacy.
Okay.
For me.
So, that's an interesting take on it. Thank you very much. I'm now going to find the gentleman. And let me see. Aha. The gentleman at the back is smiling at me. So there you are. Sir, you are invited to share. If you notice, I'm not discriminating, not on grounds of age, sex, or profession, or indeed level of maturity in law, right? So definition of privacy, sir.
My definition is simple, that according to me, privacy is a state of condition in which I can do, think, act whatever I want without being noticed by anyone else.
Okay, so basically you are saying that the right to swing my fist stops at my neighbor's nose. Okay. Well, we've heard that one. We have the young lady in an interesting scarf over here. So you're going to tell us and share with us what you think about privacy.
Okay. For me, privacy is a state of condition when one is free from surveillance or interference or disturbance from other people.
Okay. So freedom from surveillance by other people. Now that's an interesting one because it takes us back to a couple more that we've had. So, let me see. I haven't asked anybody with a beard yet, so I should ask the gentleman here. There you are. So, yes, you. So you've written it down. So kindly write out what you've written.
Well, privacy is a right for everyone to have their information, to withhold their information regarding themselves.
Aha. Now, when you couple this, what's your name, sir?
Daniel.
Hello, Daniel. So Daniel has come out with something which is slightly different from the rest. And have you noticed what that slightly different from the rest is? Daniel is articulating more clearly than the others that privacy is something which he or she controls. So he's introducing the notion of what the Germans would call informational self-determination. And why is this important? This is because it's important because of the concept of autonomy, right? Let me now ask the final question to a colleague. Adam, why don't you share your definition of privacy with us?
Sorry, I just to say to you, but that I agree. Without privacy, there can be no democracy. Because privacy very basic, very important for our people, and that our government in Indonesia must to protect and privacy, to fulfill a human right to our citizen in Indonesia.
I agree with you in everything.
Yes.
But you haven't yet told me whether privacy is a chicken or a cow or a piece of cheese. What is privacy? What is it to you? What is privacy? If your sister or your father or your daughter come to ask you, what is privacy?
Privacy is
Yes, so everybody hears you. What is privacy?
privacy is for me about my life, about my family, and so on.
Okay, so your private and family life. That's almost Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, right? Let's thank you everybody. Thank you everybody. This is always an interesting exercise to see what people think. Okay. Why did I stop on Daniel's comment, right? Because I hit statistically, normally 1 out of 10 will give me that comment. Because I would like you to link privacy to autonomy, right? So, autonomy. Let's think about autonomy, right? And what I want to share with you is the thought that autonomy is not a creation of political philosophy. What I want to share with you is a scientific finding that autonomy comes from inside us. That autonomy is part of self-determination. Remember what Daniel was talking about? That he decides what information to give or not, what to reveal or not. And in fact, one of the silliest things I've heard in my life is that privacy is something invented by people in the West and spread to the East, which is absolute, pure, undiluted rubbish. Because in fact, and let me quote some research now, I'd like to demonstrate, first of all, that the sense of autonomy is universal. It's in East and West, right? And if you look, I'm just going to quote one, but there's a lot of research out there, right? The development of conceptions of personal autonomy, rights and democracy, and their relation to psychological well-being. If you look at some of the work by psychologists and developmental psychologists in the field, right? And I've tried to summarize here the paper by Helvig and Justin McNeil. You'll find that in a variety, if you take children, and you take children, and in the experiments, they've taken children in Asia, children in Australia, children in Europe, children in the United States. You take children, you start studying these children to see how they behave from a very early age, and they immediately develop concerns with personal autonomy and rights. No, you can't do that. Yes, I can do that. No, I have the right to do that. Nobody's teaching them these things very often. They start developing rights in the way they exercise authority or lack of it with each other. And you'll find that these conceptions not only place limits on the forms of social organization which are seen as legitimate by children, right? But they have relevance for children's psychological well-being, which are consistent with self-determination theory. We go back to Daniel and self-determination, right? Now let's look at this. Areas of personal jurisdiction, choice, and participation are claimed by children and adolescents themselves as they develop explicit conceptions of their own autonomy. Right? Autonomy. Remember that at least some of you spoke about I decide. At least 2 people said I decide. Why is it I decide? Why is it so important that I decide, that not the government decides for me? Or indeed that my parents don't decide for me anymore. Why? Well, it seems to be something that we're born with almost, right? And it's not only people having autonomy and thinking about autonomy since they are kids, but these conceptions of autonomy and democracy have been shown to have functional significance for the realization of individuals' psychological well-being in diverse cultural settings. Let me say that in plain English. In plain English, that means that if I am not allowed to have autonomy as a child or a measure of autonomy, I'm going to grow up into a rather unhappy human being. In fact, psychological well-being is linked to being able to have autonomy. Go away, read the literature, and you'll find out that there's a growing body of evidence for this. Which is now why I'm going to go back to democracy and autonomy, right? Individual autonomy is an idea that is generally understood to refer to the capacity to be one's own person, to live one's life according to reasons and motives that are taken as one's own, and not the product of manipulative or distorting external forces. So what are manipulative or distorting external forces? I'm going to skip the part about Kant here. I don't even really need Kant here. Right? I'm going to take you back 30 years. Right? So this was my first book about privacy, right? Which was published in '87 and tackled principally from the perspective of law. And in that book, I quoted Paul Sieghart from 1983, who was also talking about autonomy. And let me read to you what he said, especially for those people at the back who, like myself, their eyesight may not be as good as it should be. In a society where modern information technology is developing fast, many others may be able to find out how we act. And that in turn may reduce our freedom to act as we please. Because once others discover how we act, they may think that it is in their interest or in the interest of society, or even in our own interest to dissuade us, discourage us, or even stopping us from doing what we want to do and seek to manipulate us to do what they want to do. Smart city, anybody? Will a smart city, as at least two of you said, help other people know exactly what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it? And what does that make us? I suggest to you that that makes us manipulable. We are easily manipulated. And in fact, 30 years ago, I wrote a comment about Paul Sicard. And believe it or not, after 30 years, I can't still bring myself to disagree with myself. So let me read it to you. Shorn of the cloak of privacy that protects him. This is where privacy comes in. An individual becomes transparent and therefore manipulable. A manipulable individual is at the mercy of those who control the information held about him. And his freedom, which is often relative at best, shrinks in direct proportion to the extent of the nature of the options and alternatives which are left open to him by those who control the information. And this is why privacy is so important. Why I started off with a title which says that privacy is key to me being who I am and to my becoming who I want to be. Because for me to become who I want to be, whether I am 20 years old or 30 years old or 50 years old, first I need another right, not only privacy. I need the right to freedom of expression. I need the right to be able to receive and communicate information. That right must be as large as possible, so that I can receive many options. And I don't only have one option to choose from. The more information I have, the more options I have. And then, once I have the information, what do I do with it? I process it, I think about it, I talk about it. Sometimes I will think about it on my own. Sometimes I want one or more close friends to discuss it. To do so, I need privacy. To decide which option I want to take, I need privacy. Whether it's exploring my career choices, whether it's exploring my sexuality, whether it's exploring what I want to do next in life, whether it's exploring anything. How do I do it? I need information and I need privacy. And in fact, this is closely connected, I think, and I suggest, to what we may interpret as part of the Indonesian constitution. Because this is why it's important to have privacy as part of the right to free development of personality. Because we have autonomy, we've talked about, as a value. It's something we value from when we're kids. Self-determination is part of the conceptual framework of autonomy. The right to self-determination, as mentioned first by Daniel, is a value emanating from the value of autonomy. We talk about political self-determination. We talk about political self-determination in Malaysia, when Malaysia became independent, when Indonesia became independent. We talk about all kinds of self-determination. But what about informational self-determination? Which is precisely what Daniel defined for us. Right? And what about informational determination as a design criteria for smart cities? Let's bring it back to Jakarta, right? So, how many of you actually think that the people, A, who agreed to Jakarta being a smart city, actually understood what a smart city is? And B, how many of you actually think that they did this and said, informational self-determination shall be a criteria for smart cities in Indonesia. How many? You agree with me, right? Probably none. Because of course, we saw by their very admission, smart governance, smart everything except smart politicians. So, let's go back to privacy. Of course, some of you had difficulties with the definition of privacy because as somebody once said in the 1970s, right? Privacy, like an elephant, is far more readily recognized than described. So for the time being, as one of you said, a lady I believe, informational privacy is linked to the definition of personal data. Any data which can be linked to an identified or identified individual. Let me go back a bit to my latest book. See you tomorrow. Go ahead. Because in that book, 2 years ago, I devised the framework for inquiry into privacy. Where basically I divided into 3 lenses, right? Looking at privacy from 3 different lenses. The dimension of time, the dimension of place, and the dimension of space. And if you're interested, I'll be very happy to send you the introduction for free. Just let me know and I'll make it available to you. Because I want you to ask, is privacy an end in itself? If so, what's the end? And what I wanted to tell you and reinforce is that I see privacy, of course it's an independent right, of course it's a fundamental right, of course it's a universal right. But to me it's also an enabling right. It is there to enable you, together with the right to free expression, the right to freedom of access to information, it's there to enable you to have free, unhindered development of your own personality, which is part of the Indonesian constitution. And that to me is the raison d'etre of privacy. I'll skip this. If you're interested in lex personalitatis, as I call it, I can also send you an article about that I've written some years ago. But what I want to bring this round back to is that as I go around the world in my work as UN Special Rapporteur, I find that in an internet without borders, right? All of you go into the internet. And all of you travel on the internet across many countries to see many things without borders. You don't find a policeman there asking for your passport. But what I find increasingly is that in internet without borders, people expect to have safeguards without borders and to have remedies which go across borders. And that is the function of law, right? And let's think about the kind of world we live in, right? I want you to understand how fast things are moving. Okay, let's do a small test. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay, let me reverse the question. Is anybody not on Facebook? I'm not on Facebook. Yay. How many of you are on Snapchat? Don't be shy. The girls go, me, me. How many of you are not on Snapchat? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A bit more, a bit less on Snapchat. And now we're going to do some interesting statistical analysis about this, okay? So, on the 27th of August 2015, it was news that 1 billion people used Facebook on Monday. Yup. A year and a bit later, almost 2 billion people are on Facebook now. And if you drill into the figures, you'll find that 1.87 billion are there once a month, 1.37 billion are there every day. And why are they on Facebook? So, my next question to you. I'm only going to ask 4 people now. And I would start with the young lady in blue here. My question is, Why does Facebook exist?
Because there is need for people to connect with each other.
Okay. Mark Zuckerberg would like that answer. Thank you. Why does Facebook exist?
I think the first time Facebook exists because Harvard students need a platform to connect each other without any boundaries, so we can access.
That's the perhaps the first history. But then why did it continue to exist?
Because people want to know what other people do, what other people like.
Okay. Let me go this way now, because some people have been avoiding questions. Yes, she knows it's coming her way. Look, there you are. Take the microphone. The young lady there in the faded jeans shirt. There you are. So, why does Facebook exist?
I think to one person to share something and other person to know what they person share. Like.
Okay. Who thinks that your colleagues here are forgetting something or leaving something out? Okay. Mark Zuckerberg has done a really good job. Okay. Okay, so just in case you haven't noticed, let me give you a big hint. What does not grow on trees? What makes the world go round? That's why Facebook exists. Of course, what do you expect Mark Zuckerberg to tell you? Mark Zuckerberg will tell you, I love to connect people. Let me connect you. He didn't tell you, please come and give me your personal data so I can sell it and then float Facebook for more than 100 billion on the stock exchange, did he? That wasn't the deal. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing him or Facebook. I'm just trying, to animate the discussion a bit to try and get you to think as to why many of these online businesses exist. You may enjoy using them, but there's a price. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And now you are the lunch. You are the product. You are being consumed. Let's go to the next thing. Already in 2015, the next big thing was not Facebook, but how people are using Facebook on their mobile phone. And have you thought a bit about it, right? If I go to my bag, for many reasons, including surveillance, and I start taking out phones, okay. Let me put the following question to you. If the government came along and said, from now on, every citizen shall carry a tracking device, and you are hereby obliged to carry the tracking device, how many citizens would say yes? Most people would say no, right? But you're already carrying the tracking device. You're actually paying to carry the tracking device, right? Because you have a computer here, you have a still camera here, you have a video camera here, and though it also makes phone calls. But that's almost by the by these days, right? Because one of the great differences is that people are no longer accessing Facebook on their laptop computers, but on these little devices which tell the government and Facebook and everybody else exactly where we are and exactly what we're doing. And there's a lot that we can say about our mobile phones. I could spend 3 days just talking about your mobile phones, but I want to finish soon. But let's talk about Snapchat. Look at this. June 2016, and I've deliberately chosen this for this morning, so that, this afternoon, sorry, So that I want you to see how fast the technology goes. Because I want you to think about money too. So, Snapchat passes Twitter in daily usage. 150 million people using it each day. Snapchat. But hey, wait a bit. This is a different figure now. It's not the number of people using it, it's the number of people viewing it. Because you sell your adverts per view, right? And let's look at the date. 9th November 2015, Snapchat closes in on Facebook as it hits 6 billion daily video views. So why is this example important? Because now we've gone forward from text, accessing Facebook on a mobile phone, still pictures, but now we've gone to video. Look at video, ladies and gentlemen, right? And all of you were born when this was happening. In fact, all of you are statistics. You've been contributing to this figure. And let's see how much you've contributed. 6 billion, 9th November 2015. Snapchat's video traffic is catching Facebook. January 12, 2016, 2 months later, right? 7 billion. So we went from 6 billion in November to 7 billion. February 29th, 2016, 1 month something later. Snapchat rivals Facebook with 8 billion. This is per day, huh? Remember, how many of you know how many zeros we have in 8 billion? Good, I thought of you. You're lawyers, not mathematicians, are you? Snapchat video traffic has caught up with Facebook. Snapchat, now what date is it? It's 1 month later. We're now April 2016 and 10 billion videos a day. Can you see how fast it went? In less than 6 months, it caught up Facebook, it passed it. And of course, why is that important? Who cares about these figures? Those people who are paying money for advertising. That's who cares about those figures. Let's think about the golden age of surveillance, as it's been called. And I want to read you something first from my childhood, right? 1968. Let me read this to you. Most of you who love literature would have heard of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Let me read it to you. As every man goes through life, he fills in a number of forms for the record, each containing a number of questions. There are thus hundreds of little threads radiating from every man, millions of threads in all. If these threads were suddenly to become visible, the whole sky would look like a spider's web. And if they materialize like rubber bands, buses and trams and even people would lose the ability to move. And the wind would be unable to carry torn up newspapers or autumn leaves along the streets of the city. If only I could write like that, right? It's poetry in motion. Now this is 1968, not a computer in sight. Just the forms, just the information from the forms you fill. But what are you doing today? Are you filling forms? Or are you leaving electronic footprints and electronic fingerprints each and every second of the day? If I were to ask Daniel, how much metadata did he generate today? Do you really think Daniel would know? No. Most people barely remember the texts they've put online or the pictures they've posted online. If you're lucky, they may remember. But they forget. This is a bit like Sting and the Police. I know it's an old song. But you know the song? Every step you take, every breath you make, I'll be watching you. Right? That's where we are. Because every single click you make on your phone, every single place you go to, as one of the ladies very correctly said, every time you hit a website, you're leaving your data. And you are creating the ability for people to know about you. In fact, you're making yourself surveillable. Unfortunately, the last time I checked in the dictionary, it doesn't exist in English. Surveillable. In French it does. The French are more advanced. Surveillable. It's exactly the same thing, but you pronounce it like that, like the French. Surveillable. But the point I'm making is that smart cities may accelerate our transition from served to surveillable to surveilled. And we are already super surveillable online. How many of you use VPN? 1, 2, 3. I take great joy in trying to let people think I'm in Germany when I'm in Indonesia. So I keep setting my VPN to different countries with different dynamic addresses. Just for the sheer fun of it, you can go on the internet and find out I'm in Indonesia. You know, anything to be a bit pesky with them from time to time. Because we're always online, aren't we? We're always on. We're online inside. We're online outside. In fact, the point is, as this cartoon accurately, we all leave a digital footprint, and the concern of a lot of people is that once it's online, it's virtually impossible to scrub out, and the data on you will follow you around for life, which is why the colleague our colleague first, when talking about the right to be forgotten, was hitting a very important point. Do you have the right to be forgotten? How many of you have done stupid things while you are students that you wouldn't want your employers to know in future? Or your future boyfriends to know? Or your future girlfriends to know? Certainly your parents to know? Or are you all a bunch of saints? Because, let me quote something from Richard Branson. I'm not necessarily a great fan of Richard Branson, but he said something useful. That every risk is worth taking as long as it's for a good cause and contributes to a good life. Okay, so what's a good life, right? Certainly it's not standing around with a microphone and a jacket and tie in Indonesia, which is why I'll stop soon. Whereas a good life, let's think about a good life. Is this a good life? Could be a good life, right? Looks like a good life. But are smart cities a good life? Are smart cities worth the risk? Because look how many smart things we're going to have. Smart house. Hey, Jakarta wants to have smart houses. You saw that. I didn't say it, the government did. Right? Smart energy. Electric bus. Smart transportation. Jakarta wants to have that too. Right? And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to have a smart city. I'm saying it's wrong to have a smart city if you don't implement the principle of privacy by design. That's what I'm saying. So I'm encouraging you and everybody in Indonesia to think privacy, to breathe privacy, and to introduce, implement, and deploy the principles of privacy by design. Not privacy by accident, privacy by design. In fact, I have a small joke here. You know, Bill Clinton became famous for saying, it's the economy, stupid, right? And I'm not famous, but I still say it's the smart city, stupid, right? And what's stupid, right? Definition of stupid. Knowing the truth, seeing the truth, but still believing the lies. And that's my definition of stupid, right? So, and the question I want to ask you is, are we being stupid about smart cities? What do others understand by the term smart city? And I've already asked you this, right? And I've tried Googling images about smart city, right? And of course, will the aggregation of all data in a smart city lead to an unacceptable deterioration of our quality of life? That is the question that I'm trying to get you to ask yourselves. So in fact, is it smart everything except us? Smart energy, smart integration, smart water, smart public service, smart buildings. Incidentally, I've been using this slide for 2 years now. But I picked the one from Jakarta this morning, and it's amazing how many things you're saying you won't have the same thing. Okay. So before going on to smart city solutions, let's reflect a bit about privacy and rewriting the social contract. I don't know the extent to which you read about the social contract in Indonesia. But in many countries, those of us who study philosophy and Jean-Jacques Rousseau would remember that Rousseau wrote this book, The Social Contract, Du Contrat Social, in Geneva a few hundred years ago, which he described the contract between the citizen and society. And what I'm trying to say is that I'm asking the question, have the last 10 years of the internet already changed the social contract? Have governments and companies, both of them, changed the contract between the citizen and society without asking us? And that's the point. Did they ask us? So, I'm going to conclude by telling you a few things about what we're doing in my mandate in the field of data protection and privacy, how we're trying to help this along, we're trying to help to answer some of these questions, right? You can go and read my reports. I hope they're not as boring as some would think. But I make 2 reports every year, one to the Human Rights Council in March of every year, and one to the General Assembly in August, September of every year. And I have set 5 priorities. My 5 priorities at this moment in time are a better understanding of privacy, and now you know why, because look at me going around the room and seeing what people understand about privacy. Security and surveillance, which are very important. Big data and open data, health data, and personal data held by corporations. And if any of you want to ask any questions about these, please feel free to do so now. I've talked about the right to remain silent. So, how many of you have already studied criminal law? Have you all done criminal law yet? Say yes, don't be shy. Has anybody not studied criminal law? Anybody not studied? A few, okay. And do you have the right to remain silent in Indonesia? Yes? No? Yes? Comme si, comme ça? Okay. I'll get back to that later if you want, right? But the last thing, and I will stop here, the last thing I said in March of this year, that's last month, in my last report to the UN Human Rights Council is that I think we should have an international agreement about cyber surveillance, about the way we surveil in cyberspace, because there are some things which only countries can agree about. I've also talked about the CIA leaks and other things, but what I'm going to do is actually, if you want, you can go to my website and look at the thematic reports we're going to issue. Here you can see one of the things that I've organized, which is the International Intelligence Oversight Forum. That's 2016. We're organizing 2017, where we get all the oversight mechanisms for intelligence together in one room and try to study good practices and bad practices. This is the last one, which was organized in the Parliament in Bucharest. And essentially convey the meaning here, the new international legal instruments on surveillance, possibly taking us from soft law to hard law are needed. I'm going to stop here. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be very happy to field any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Cannataci, for your interesting presentation. I shall now open for a Q&A session. Is there any questions on the floor? Please raise your hand.
Regarding your slide, I just want to make it more clear regarding the translation, please, for the
Which one?
slide. Indonesian Constitution.
Okay, hang on. I'll go.
Indonesian Constitution, the first slide.
It is, I'm going back. Okay.
Yes. Actually, the last sentence, the last rows, yeah, seek, obtain, possess. The correct translation is not possess, because in our constitution we talk about ownership, memiliki its ownership. So if we're referring to the Article 17 and Article 19, the ICCPR only
talking about Article 28F.
Yeah, this is my constitution,
yes,
Indonesian constitution. But if we refer to resource, the ICCPR, they're only talking about seek, receive, and impart. But correct. We have seek, obtain, possess is not the correct translation. This is ownership. So I'm become a little bit confused and afraid that these provisions will against the basic principles regarding privacy.
Well,
because if I seek information and related to the personal data and I found in internet, it means I cannot say that I am an owner owning that data. I just only possess, right? Just only keep it, but not saying own it, right? So that is, I just want to clarify about the little.
Thank you very much. I'll explain this today.
Yeah,
I got this from somebody in Indonesia.
Yes,
right?
so that's why
I didn't translate it myself. But
yeah, so that's why
the point that you make is very important. Let me explain why. In fact, the point that you make is very important, sir, because in many countries, the protection of personal data is completely divorced from ownership, right? So, if you look, for example, let's take European law, but many other countries are in the same position. We don't care who owns the data. I'll give you an example, right? Let's examine, Ruben is a doctor, in our example. He works for the state hospital or a state hospital in Jakarta. I am the patient. I go to Ruben, give him my data. Do we really care who owns my data? Or do we care who controls it? Right? In many systems of law, we don't make the distinction whether Ruben is working for the government, is working as a private practitioner in his own clinic. We don't care. In fact, in many systems of law, ownership is irrelevant. What is relevant is who controls the data and what is the level of protection we need to apply to that data. And this is where we then come to the synergy that we need to achieve between freedom of information, freedom of expression, and privacy. In fact, when you examine the laws on freedom of expression and freedom of access to information in many countries which have those laws, and there are now today nearly 120 countries which have those laws, you will find that there are always safeguards for privacy when you have freedom of expression or freedom of information. In other words, we go back to how I summarized the intervention by the gentleman at the back, which is, do I have the right to do anything I like? Yes, I have the right to swing my fist, but it stops on my neighbor's nose, right? So the interface between privacy and freedom of expression is very important. Would you like to add anything else, sir? Because I saw you raised the microphone.
This is my first point, and I strongly agree with you, and you helped me to clarify to all the floors that we have a big homework or maybe fallacy regarding the constitution formulation related with the right to have information, seek, obtain, but constitution saying ownership. They should be possessed because relevant is control, not ownership.
Yep.
Right. This is so I strongly agree. The second point is my government now try to have one identity for all.
Okay.
So many countries from developing countries prefer to single credentials, centralized, related to the identity. So I need your your opinion regarding that. Is that good if the government would like to provide the citizens based on tax interest, and they would like to make interoperable driving license, citizen card, national citizen card, tax number, and also some information related to the credit card activities. So I need your opinion regarding about that condition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It is a very, very important point. Not a very important, very, very important point. I think we should start off by the principle which says that data should be collected for one purpose and only used for that purpose or for a compatible purpose. You will have noticed that one of the task groups that I have set up deals with big data and open data. There is a risk, a very serious risk to privacy, by the government aggregating too much of your data unless it really needs it. So, any government, not only the Indonesian government, any government which makes it too easy to aggregate data without putting in adequate safeguards, including for interoperability, is creating too great a risk for the privacy of the citizen. Not only that, let's remember how big the risk is. Let's use an old example. When a certain Austrian gentleman with a small mustache called Adolf Hitler wanted to find out who the Jews were in the Netherlands, he didn't have any computers. He had a small army of clerks going through the little cards for social security, because those cards mentioned whether you were Juden, a Jew or not. So as you can see, data collected for one purpose is being used for another purpose. That purpose was to send them to the concentration camps. I'm not saying that the Indonesian government intends to do that. Don't get me wrong. What I am saying, however, is that in 2017, you no longer need an army of clerks. You don't even need a regiment of clerks. You don't even need a company of clerks, to keep on the military analogy. You barely need a platoon of computer programmers to be able to put all the data about people in Indonesian society together and aggregate it. Which means that it is much easier for anybody who wishes to become a dictator to create intensive profiles of everybody in Indonesian society, manipulate them, manipulate the information that they get to them, and otherwise abuse of their data. So, justice should not only be done, it should also be seen to be done. Therefore, any requests for aggregation of data by any government on the planet should be accompanied by a very solid business case, and any aggregation should be subject to very strict safeguards. Aggregation should not become a matter of course. Some governments across the world are trying to make it a matter of course. Some claim it's for security, some claim it's for tax. Whatever they claim, it's for control. And that is the risk that one faces. That is the risk that privacy helps protect us from. It protects us from being manipulable, as I said before, and therefore must be very careful about any such measures, whichever government takes them. I hope I've answered your question, sir.
I saw another raising hand. Yeah, the gentleman over there.
Thank you. My name is Robi Salamunev, and I would like to ask about mass surveillance. For example, although that I still haven't get how that people would act differently if government put all CCTVs all over the city. I still think that even if it's true, that what's your opinion on that? How is that the price we should pay for security? Because the government narrative about putting all the CCTV all around the city is to prevent potential criminal, for example, or for the intelligence give mass surveillance or in electronic devices is to prevent potential terrorism. What's your personal opinion on is it the price?
I can give you my professional opinion on that, not only
personal,
my personal. First of all, let me summarize it in the following way. Targeted surveillance good, mass surveillance bad. Okay? Mass surveillance should be linked to the objective of the surveillance. And that objective should be linked to the risk. Why was I talking about risk? Why did I quote Richard Branson on risk first? So what's the risk? What's the risk of somebody in this class being a terrorist? You will find it is infinitesimally small. If you had to take the total number of terrorists in Indonesia over the past 20 years and divide the Indonesian population by that, you would find it's a fraction of your toe, perhaps, sir, that might have a chance of being a terrorist. So is it right? Is it proportionate to the risk? And is it proportionate to the benefit gained that everybody in this room is placed under surveillance? And my clear answer is no. Incidentally, it's not only my answer. It's the answer of the European Court on Human Rights in the case Zakharov versus Russia. It's the answer of the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg in the case Tillis-Verget 2 and Watson. It is disproportionate, right? And since it is disproportionate, we do not allow it. With regards to your first question, which deals with what happens to our behavior, it is accepted as part of social psychology, as part of social anthropology, it is accepted that people who are placed under surveillance and are aware of surveillance, there is a chilling effect upon them. The chilling effect, which is also something you observe when people know they are being watched insofar as censorship is concerned, and therefore people behave differently. If you want to learn a bit more about that, I suggest you look up the literature on, for example, the way that the Chinese change their speech on the internet all the time. So the Chinese have developed a system. So you should remember, right, that in China there are between 2 million and 3 million, let me repeat that, 2 million and 3 million internet police, right? Their job is just to listen to what you're saying, read what you're saying on the blog, right? Put it into your profile, shut you down if you need to. The Chinese are wise to that. So what do? They devise new names and new words to describe a phenomenon, whether it's corruption, whether it's a certain politician, whatever. So not only is there a chilling effect, but there's an interesting workaround effect, that they change their language, and sometimes, as some research suggests, they will change it within the hour. And a group of 20, 30, 40 people discussing something will stop within 28 minutes, 34 minutes. I have one of my friends who does nothing but measure these things. And then change to another language in order to continue to be able to discuss it without the people being able to follow them. So yes, sir, there is certainly a documented chilling effect. And in fact, some societies have taken the opposite view. So for example, we had a garden in Barcelona, which was well known as somewhere where in the evening, young couples went together. And just in case you're not understanding, let me make it clear, they did not go there to pray. Okay? So, the town put cameras inside the garden. A number of citizens went to court and said, I'm sorry, but that garden has been used by couples for the past 100 years, and they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. The cameras were taken down. Now, this standard may differ from one society to another. I'm not necessarily saying that Indonesia should adopt the same standards. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, however, that you have standards of privacy which are deployed in society. They may be deployed in slightly different ways in different societies, because some things may be more private in Indonesia, some things may be a bit less private. But in the end, I sincerely believe that if we had to carry out fundamental research, we'd find out that Indonesians care about their privacy. And if they care about their privacy, whatever the technology, they would not necessarily welcome it if they deem it to be too intrusive, right? Because at the end of the day, are you convinced that everybody needs to have sneaky software on their smartphones telling the government what they're reading? And in fact, let me give you an example for which I have a standard test. Okay. I hope there are some Indonesian lawyers in the room who can help me out. If the police arrest you in Indonesia, do you have the right to remain silent? Yes or no? In a criminal trial, do you have the right to remain silent? Yes or no? In most countries, the answer is yes. In some countries, it's a qualified yes. Are any lawyers in the room going to help me out on this one? Do you have a constitutional right to a fair trial? Yes. In most countries, the right to remain silent is interpreted as being the right, part of the right to a fair trial. I'm going to go back and check this out now for Indonesia. But in many countries, it's not only the accused who has the right to remain silent, but also his wife, or her husband, or their partner. Now I'm going to ask you a question, especially those of you who have boyfriends or girlfriends or husbands or wives. Who knows about you more? Your partner, your husband, your wife, or your smartphone? So should your smartphone be a compellable witness, especially if you are not, or your wife is not? Think about it. Because this is one of the problems I have to face, and one of the problems that I've raised to the United Nations. To be fair, I don't have an answer yet, because the right to remain silent is something which has been developed in law for the past 400 years in many jurisdictions. And it's only related to privacy in a certain way. But what I can tell you is, nothing knows about you more than your smartphone. Nothing. Nothing. Because every click you make, it can show you what you are thinking when. Nothing can profile you more than your smartphone. It shows you when you're fighting with your girlfriend. It shows you when you're telling her that you love her. It shows you when you tell her that you want to kiss her. I could go on, but I won't. It tells you when you're doing your assignment late. It tells you when you're researching for your assignment late because you're busy there Googling at night, 3 hours before you're supposed to hand it in. It tells a lot about you. It tells if and when you're interested in sex. It tells you when you're online trying to hunt for something new to buy, a new present, a new pair of sneakers, a new car, a new motorcycle. It's all there. So do you think that the state should be able to read all that? And how is the state going to discover? Or the difference is this, and I'll stop here. If the state has reasonable suspicion that Joe Cannataci is a terrorist or organized crime, then I think you can put as many bugs as you like on his software, on his phone, and read everything he's saying. No problem. So long as you go before to the judge and say, Judge, may I have permission? I think Joe Cannataci is a terrorist. May I have permission to put privacy intrusive software on his phone so that I can monitor what he's doing, saying, thinking, communicating? That's the way we do things in a civilized democracy. But to go and put intrusive software on the phone on anybody in the class is, to me, a grossly disproportionate approach. I hope I've explained and answered your question. Next. We have a lady here who wants to ask a question.
My name is Bella, and I want to ask you about the data that is already out there.
Okay.
Because not many of us know.
Stella, would you mind holding the mic in front of your mouth, please? Thanks. So everybody can hear you.
Oh, okay.
It's okay, you know. Something singers get used to.
Okay, I want to ask you about the data our data that is already out there, because not many of us knows about this information you just given us, and what can we do about our data if we wish to destroy it or erase it? Because now that I think of it, we weren't actually choosing freely when we release our data, because we don't actually know what's going to happen to that data after we release it. Even if with the guarantee they've given us, we still don't know. So what's your opinion about this? Thank you.
That's an excellent question, Stella. And in fact, my opinion is you should immediately come to work for me, because I need people who think questions like that. That is why it's very important that you have a proper data protection law in Indonesia. Because a proper data protection law gives you the right to delete data which is no longer required. A proper data protection law gives you the right to access data which is held about you, to question why it was collected, and if the purpose for which it was collected is no longer valid, you can ask for it to be deleted. I give you an example. I want a bank loan for 5 years. I go to the bank. I give them my data. They give me the bank loan. I pay the bank loan. Does anybody need to keep the data anymore? No. But this is not what they're doing, are they? Now, if you use your credit card to pay for flowers for the person you love on Valentine's Day, it's there. Next Valentine's Day, 3 companies are trying to sell you flowers. That's what's happening. So in fact, what's happened is we've shifted the model. We've shifted the model to one where you give data and then you have the right to access it and the right to delete it if it's no longer necessary for the purposes for which it was collected, to one where we seem to be accepting, oh, it's okay. Because Stella or whoever signed a little clause of consent saying that I can use the data, then I'm going to keep on using it for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And this is something why I would encourage you very strongly to take a very strong interest in the law which is being discussed or should continue to be discussed inside Indonesia. Because it's a very important law. The constitution is at one level, but then you need more detailed rules to make the spirit of the constitution work on a daily basis. And if needs be, you may even want to improve or amend your constitution. Many countries have done this already. So thank you for the question. The data that's out there, some of it you're going to find very difficult to track down and change. Others you can help make redundant very quickly. Others you can work for by having an improvement in the law and accessing and deleting it with the law. And of course, the best data is the one that you don't give them, right? So one of the things you should try to do as much as possible is, 1, all use VPN. Don't give your IP address away. 2, all use military-grade encryption. Don't let them read what you're doing. How many of you use Gmail here? Gmail. Okay. How many of you know that every single thing you write is being read by a computer program? Yeah. Very few. So if you write a note from Daniel to Stella saying, I'm interested in gardening, within 10 minutes to 10 hours, you can expect the first adverts on gardening tools, on gardening seeds, on greenhouses, on gardening fairs, everything. Just because you mentioned the word gardening in an email from Stella to Daniel. So you have to remember, money is what makes the world go round. People are trying to make money, and you are the product. So what you have to do is take measures to prevent your data being known. Right? And unless you really need it, I do message too. But I message using a product which is encrypted and which doesn't give me adverts. And if needs be, I'm prepared to pay for it. I don't pay for it much. My VPN costs me what? $5 a month? Right? And yet I'm changing my IP address every 3 hours. I keep them guessing. So it's funny, yesterday somebody had made me try to write something in German. Because yesterday I chose German. There are occupational hazards, but there are some stupid laws which don't work. For example, cookies and cookie law, right? Try and switch off cookies on your browser and do online banking. It's impossible. So, switch on the cookies only when you're doing the banking, right? We could go on. There are many measures you can take. But I hope I've answered at least part of your question. Thank you. It was a very intelligent question.
Thank you, Professor Cannataci. And I know that we are run out of time, but since this lecture is also doing in the live streaming, we have also a question from one of the participants on the live streaming. His name is Lyman Suyono, and he's asking that, he said, a former intelligence officer of UK Army once said to him, I would be disappointed if the government lacks the capability to read our emails and electronic accounts. And the question is that having the capability is one thing and using it is another matter. how far should we challenge the state security apparatus in order to maintain our privacy and yet, at the same time, keeping us safe? And also, it is also land to the second question that it is in his opinion that sometimes the doctrine outweigh laws and regulations on privacy, and what should we do about that?
Okay. Firstly, thank you, very interesting question. Firstly, I don't believe in the statement privacy versus security. I don't believe, in fact, I believe that there's a false dichotomy between privacy and security. I believe that there should be synergy between privacy and security. To go back to music, you know, those of you who know the group Queen and the song, I Want It All. I don't want privacy or security. I want privacy and security. But I would like to think I'm realistic. And by realistic, what do I mean? I look at all the attacks that take place, and I look at all the privacy or intelligence laws that we have, and I find out that 99% of the attacks that take place are carried out by people already known to the police, already known to the intelligence services. So with all due respect, putting privacy intrusive software on everybody's smartphones isn't working, is it? So if what works is to employ more policemen and more security services agents and have them follow Ruben or Joe because there is reasonable suspicion and therefore they are subject to targeted surveillance, then that's great. But with all due respect, the police or intelligence officer there, I think should be disappointed. He wants to be, yes, let him be disappointed. Why? Because, once again, the measure should be proportionate. Let's talk about proportionate for 2 minutes. 1, how many people die out? So, recently I gave a lecture in the UK, right? And as you know, the UK is a target for terrorism. In fact, it's been a target for terrorism all my life. Before it used to be the IRA, and now it's somebody else. So, can anybody tell me what is the average number of people who died thanks to terrorism in the UK every year for the past 10 years? Come on, hazard a guess. How many? Huh? 100? No, 5 every year. Yeah. How many people in the UK died falling off a ladder every year? 11. Are we going to ban ladders? How many people died falling out of bed in the UK every year? 15. Of course, we shall ban beds, right? Ban beds? Ban beds. How many people died at work? More than 500. But what did we do? Did we ban work? No. We put in laws which make work safer. That's what we did. How many people died in automobile accidents? 1,786. Are we going to ban cars? And yes, it's regretful. It's a terrible tragedy that somebody took a knife and killed a policeman in front of Westminster after killing 4 people with a car. But is it a proportionate response? Because out of 1 in a trillion times that people use a knife, somebody uses it to kill somebody with. How many times have you all used a knife today? And how many times was a knife used to kill somebody with today? How many safe journeys do we make with cars or buses or trucks? And how many times are trucks and buses used to kill people? So we don't ban trucks, cars, or knives just because very rarely they're used to kill people. So should we ban privacy? Because from time to time, WhatsApp is used to send a message by one terrorist to another. So my response to the gentleman, Ruben, is this. One, if you remove the ability to communicate using encryption from a product like WhatsApp, which is used by 1.3 billion people on the planet, my humble opinion is that you're only going to hurt the good guys. Because the bad guys will always have access to encryption. The really bad guys are organized enough to have access to encryption. So at most, you will only catch the very stupid criminals, the very stupid terrorists. Because the organized ones are going to have different levels of encryption. To my mind, that is not proportionate. I prefer, perhaps at my age, I have lived through the IRA, the Brigate Rosse, Baader-Meinhof. How many other terrorist groups do you want me to mention? I don't consider it proportionate as a response. And to me, the answer is always the same. If I want to put a picture on the wall, on this wall, and it weighs 500 grams, I put it on a nail and I use a hammer. If I use a sledgehammer, I'm going to smash the wall and not be able to put up anything. And that to me is what I would be doing if I smash privacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That's the end of this Q&A session. And as the Q&A session has ended and as our time has elapsed, I shall now end the session. And I would like again thank you, Professor Cannataci, for your interesting discussion on the right to privacy. And also I would like to thank you all for coming here, and hopefully that this lecture can bring you a new dimension on how we shape and how we see the right to privacy in Indonesia. Again, on behalf of ELSAM, we would like to thank you all for coming here, and good luck.